Canes Insight! What's going on? We are back here for another edition of the Canes Insight podcast, presented by Caneswear. I'm your host, managing editor of Canes Insight, Stephen Adams, and you know we have another great show for you guys today. Last week, D Money and I recapped everything we saw from the offense in this 2021 season for the Hurricanes. So you know this week we had to run it back, finish it off with the defense, giving our final thoughts and analysis on UM's 2021 season from this stop unit, recapping the highs, the lows, and how the Hurricanes are positioned in the future moving forward into 2022 with Mario Cristobal. All that and much more coming right up. But first, you know we have to check in with our guys over at Caneswear, your one-stop shop for Miami Hurricanes apparel and gear. It seems like every week those guys over at Caneswear are adding a new collection or adding to an existing collection. Caneswear always has the latest stuff from Dime Life. They got this new tee on there from Dime Life called the Sean Taylor House Call. Got a pretty cool design of Sean Taylor on the front. I really like that. You guys got to check that one out. Caneswear also added to the Xavier Restrepo XR7 line with new hats, looking pretty slick there. A new collection by AB Stickers also on site and in store in Davie. It's t-shirts that commemorate Miami's 1991 national championship season, but it's got a little style where it's looking like a presidential campaign. You got your two running mates, Gino Torretta, Lamar Thomas on top and bottom. Gino and Lamar 91. Pretty cool concept. Can get that in white or black. Check out all of Caneswear's featured collections and much more on the website caneswear.com, where orders over $99 ship for free. Or if you're more of a people person, go on over and say hi to Brett at the Caneswear storefront in Davie off University Drive in the Arrowhead Shopping Center. You've got nothing to lose and everything to gain over at Caneswear, your one-stop shop for Miami Hurricanes apparel and gear. How do you Caneswear? We are back here on the Canes Insight podcast, as always, talking some Miami Hurricanes football. And now we're heading over to the defense and seeing what this defense brought us in the 2021 season. This Manny Diaz defense. I think really the defense ended up being his downfall overall, obviously. Just not quite up to the standard of, the standard that he himself set when he first became defensive coordinator here in Miami. And, the slow decline of the defense kind of cratered out this year. And you really saw, the fruit of that and kind of cost him his job. But, of course, there's still plenty of stuff to talk about here on the defense as well. When we start with the defensive line, of course, going into the season, we didn't have a ton of huge expectations for, what we were going to get out of this defensive line, especially when you compare it to, the defensive lines of the past few years, especially under some of those lines that Manny had. There was just no one guy that you could really kind of turn to and be like, oh, that guy is a high NFL draft pick, or that's a true stud on this defensive line. There was no Chad Thomas, Joe Jackson, Jalen Phillips, Greg Rousseau, Quincy Roche. There was none of that this year. So all of that considered, I think the defensive line, at least from a pass rushing standpoint, ended up playing about as well as we could have expected, at least as well as I expected. Canes ended up with 33 sacks on the season. During the regular season, 2.75 per game, good for 35th in the country. No one guy really stood out in that department. The team leader was Zach McLeod with 5.5, a guy that had never even played the position before. So it just goes to show you that, that lack of true depth and, real stud on this defensive line. It was really a huge group effort, and that's kind of what we were talking about in the preseason. What would kind of have to be the case: defensive end, defensive line by committee. We had the senior transfer DeAndre Johnson had 4.5 sacks. We didn't quite see that huge jump we were hoping for with Jafari Harvey. Kind of disappointing, 2.5 sacks. Chance Williams had some flashes here and there. Just not too consistent overall. Ended with 1.5 sacks. Guys like Jared Harrison Hunt. You saw Leonard Taylor start to come on a little bit towards the end of the season. Feels like a theme with this whole group. Just a solid performance, but not elite, nothing that was going to carry Miami to ACC title game or the playoffs or anything like that. Still tons of room for improvement in that department. But again, just when I look back to where we were at the beginning of the season, I think they played pretty well just for what they were actually bringing into the season. D-Money.
I would agree in terms of, I think Jess Simpson's a good coach, and I think he got the most out of these guys. So I would agree with you on that. But in general, looking at the defensive line, especially compared to some of the recent defensive lines going back to 2016, I would say there's a lack of body types. And I think you're seeing that with Cristobal, the way he's come in and started offering guys that are 6'6", 270. Some of that might be moving more towards, a 3-4 scheme or a 2-gapping type of scheme. But this defensive line did not look the way it should have looked physically. If you ask me who looks the part on Miami's defensive line, I would have said John Ford, maybe Chance Williams, and that's it. You either had guys that were too skinny like Hunt and Taylor, or you just had guys that were not the right dimensions. Zach McLeod, who had a good year, really maximized his talent, but he's an undersized defensive end. Nessa's not the biggest guy in the world. It was not a very good looking unit. Jafari Harvey probably should be more of an outside linebacker. So that to me is a story of the defensive line. It just did not look right. And it was a position that had been a strength of Miami, really going back to 2016, and was no longer that. Not a lot of NFL body types. And I think that led to the collapse of this Manny Diaz defense. It was one of the main factors, particularly the end. You didn't have Greg Rousseau, Jalen Phillips, Quincy Roche, John Garvin, Joe Jackson. These guys all play. These guys were all in the NFL getting sacks. And Muhammad before that. I mean, these guys, McIntosh, Kendrick Norton, these are guys that were real players. You don't have that. You took a step backwards. That's something that Mario's going to have to clean up going forward. But that was really a story of the defensive line to me. As far as individuals to highlight, Leonard Taylor, I agree, showed a lot of flashes. He looked like a kid. He probably shouldn't have been playing just from a physical standpoint. If he went to like an Alabama, a Clemson, a Georgia, he probably would have played less and just they would have fattened him up a little bit or maybe played him outside. Defensive tackle here. He's someone that needs to get a lot stronger, but you love the talent. The guy's unbelievable talent. When you have 8 tackles for loss, 9 tackles for loss, and very limited reps, a couple sacks, you're really excited about what you got with him, but he will need to develop. I put Hunt in the exact same category, although he's been here longer, still needs to get a lot stronger. Talk about Aaron Feld with the mustache. Those 2 guys are on the top of his list of guys I think need to physically improve. Jafari Harvey was a little disappointing to me. I thought he'd have more production, even if it's just cleanup sacks or stunts. I expected him to get to the quarterback more. I think there's still talent there. He has the ability, but that needs to improve quite a bit. Maybe moving to more of a stand-up role in whoever the new defensive coordinator system is will help, because he's probably more of that than a true 4-3 defensive end, rangy type of guy like we've had with Diaz. Defensive tackle, got to get stronger there. We'll see what happens with Nesta. I thought he hustled a lot this year. I mean, a lot of hustle plays, was good. Not dominant, but certainly a good player. It'll be interesting to see what he does going forward. His personality is kind of polarizing. I don't even know if they want him to come back. He got in a fight with teammates this year, but he also played extremely hard. So that's one to watch. And then I think we need to replace Ford, because Ford is going to be like a Fabu Kamalu or Olsen Pierre, where people say he was really not much of a player. And then the guy's playing on Sundays randomly just because of his body type, his athleticism, and he's in a scheme where he can be successful. So I wouldn't sleep on that loss. I think that's a bigger loss than people realize. And that's something that will need to be replaced. But overall, defensive line, you saw some flashes from Elijah Roberts. I like that. I like him as a player. He's got to find his position, see if he fills out and becomes a tackle, stays the defensive end. We'll see where that goes. Chance Williams, you saw the speed, you saw the size, but still needs to work on his technique, a little bit stiff, gets stuck on blocks. A lot of work on that defensive line, but the first job for Mario is improving the body types. Because if you ask about the 2021 Canes defense, that horrible 100th, ranked in the hundreds defense, body types on defensive line is the start of the problem.
Yeah, for me, it's just they got to get back to finding that stud defensive end that can really create havoc in the backfield, create a ton of sacks, tackles for loss. Because when you have that one guy that you can kind of build around him and have all these other complementary pieces, and it really makes for an elite level defense when you have that going on at the defensive line, able to put the pressure on the quarterback like that. And that's what's going to take them to get them back to that elite defense, as opposed to just a solid middling unit that we saw this year, in terms of that defensive line. Heading over to linebacker, I mean, another position that has just been much maligned over these past few years at Miami, and this year, certainly no exception. It seemed like a lot of guys that, comparing it to the defensive line as well, it's just solid guys that can fill a role at Miami, but not necessarily, true starting level guys that you really want to be relying on that first unit at Miami in the ACC if you're trying to build an elite, championship level team that competes for those type of titles. A lot of solid guys, Corey Flagg, Wayne and Steve. I know you're high on Keontra Smith, D-Money. We saw a ton of flashes from him, and I think he was probably one of the better playmakers on this linebacker unit as well. Just overall, I just personally was just underwhelmed with the linebacker play, and it's just something that has to get fixed. I mean, and that's again, you talk about why this defense has continually felt like they've been taking steps back year in year out under Manny. It goes back to that linebacker recruiting, and that was Manny's area. That was his, that was kind of his baby, that linebacker unit, and just the recruiting talent level was just not there. So again, Mario got to be one of his number one priorities is bringing in some physical linebackers. They already started that process with Wesley the Saint, bringing in guys that are physical but can also run and cover at that second level. That's kind of his mandate. That's what he's got to do to kind of fix this thing. And but it'll be interesting to see how all these pieces kind of fall together next year and going forward.
When you linebacker was a problem spot. I mean, I've been sounding the alarm on linebacker when people were complaining about Shaq and Pickney before the season. When you linebacker was a trouble spot, and it was terrible. I mean, it really was, to me, a below average Power 5 position, well below average. I mean, it was bad. I think Miami in general, their talent is average to good to very good across the board. Not going to compare with the elite teams, but certainly by ACC standards, talent's not a problem. But with linebacker, talent was a problem. They were less talented than pretty much every team we played in the ACC, in my opinion. And it's funny with Manny's defense. I remember when Shaq Ford was putting up numbers, people said, "Oh, it's the product of this aggressive Manny scheme." But look at Shaq's numbers compared to someone like Corey Flagg. I just pulled it up. Corey Flagg's last year, 60 tackles, 7 for loss, and then 3 sacks. Shaq, 107 tackles, 15 and a half for loss, 12 career sacks. So, Shaq was so much better player than Corey Flagg that made that much of a difference. And Shaq, really good player, was not a Jonathan Vilma or John Beeson or that level. So there is a long, long way to go in terms of improving the talent at the linebacker position. I thought Keontra Smith showed a lot of flashes. I liked his speed. I liked his instincts. Still a little small. He moved in spring of last year. I think another full year plus some weight training will help him. He is a guy that at least looks like a Miami linebacker and looked like he was able to make plays. But everybody else, no one really showed much of anything. I would say Chase Smith, who played striker this year and was an unbelievable player in spring. He, to me, is the guy that will ultimately be Miami's next great linebacker. He has the size. He's huge, 6'4", strong, plays stronger than his size even. And he's still pretty big looking when you see him in person. He has sideline to sideline speed, probably runs in the 4.6s, 4.5s. And then has the ability to play man coverage, which is why he was that striker. But he's big enough to play at that linebacker position. You saw that flash against Duke in the 4th and 1. So he is the guy that I think needs to move inside and give us a Miami linebacker, because we really do not have Miami linebackers on the roster right now. That's a portal position. That's the conversion position. Striker, which we could talk about here with everybody else. Frierson took a step back. He was one of the better. I thought he was one of the better overall linebackers, second level players in the ACC last year in terms of 2020, 2021, not quite the same. Still struggling with physicality. Striker took a step back, and linebacker just really, really not where it needs to be. That's a position that Miami needs to make significant improvements with Mario right away, because it's between the defensive line body type issues and the linebackers issues that we're talking about. I would say that's a good 75% of why Miami's defense. Well, let's say 90% of why Miami's defense was so bad this year. The remaining 10%, I'd say poor tackling, poor communication in the secondary, which we'll get to now.
Oh man, don't even remind me about the tackling, man. That was completely awful. I mean, it definitely got a little bit better towards the end of the season, but man, I remember in the beginning of the year, all those missed tackles. It was just like literally every play was a missed tackle, sometimes multiple times in a play. Yeah, that Miami tackling, they were almost a laughingstock of the country. I remember everyone was pointing that out too. It wasn't just a local thing or within the ACC. They really got to get that fixed. You look towards some of these young guys, some of these freshmen or second year players that you're hoping that can emerge. And, we said this last year too, we're hoping some of these, younger guys could emerge. It didn't quite, happen like that, but there are some guys like, we were pretty high on, like Deshaun Troutman, Avery Huff, just never really has put it together. Sam Brooks, has had the injuries. Another guy just hasn't completely put it together. Ryan Rigoni, if he's getting, snaps in this defense, I mean, that kind of tells you everything you need to know, about what's going on here at linebacker. A guy, and another guy I know you're pretty high on that didn't get to play this year, Tyler Johnson. We'll be able to, get to see next year, hopefully get to see more of him, what he's able to do in this linebacking unit. So, and of course, guy like Wesley Basaint coming in, he really has a huge opportunity to really, take hold of the starting job and never look back. Those freshman era linebackers like Shaq and Pink and even Zach McLeod, that could be a type of career we're looking at. He certainly has the opportunity, Wes Basaint, but something I am sure that Mario is absolutely a little bit concerned about heading into next year. So, moving on to the secondary D money, you kind of brought up those communication issues that the Canes had. And, coming into the season, they were starting to get a little bit of the DJ Ivey hype again. We thought we were past that, after the last few years of disappointments. But it kind of started up again with, Coach T. Rob with the comparisons to J.C. Horn. And then, you had such an amazing athlete with Tyreek Stevenson transferring in from Georgia. Those two guys being able to play together and adding to the mix, to Corey Couch, how he came on so strong towards the ends of that 2020 season. You were beginning to kind of see the makings of potentially a pretty good cornerback unit. And of course, the safeties, Bubba Bolden, Gervin Hall, guys that have played a ton of football in their careers. At Miami and in Bolden's case at USC as well. So, you had pretty high expectations for, relative to the rest of the defense, at least talent wise, it seemed like the most talent on this defense was in the secondary. Again, just never really felt like it fully came together this season, with what they were doing on the back end. The Kings finished, in terms of pass defense, they finished 101st in the country, gave up over 250 yards per game. And, you saw the struggles of Bubba Bolden and Gervin Hall. And it's just so disappointing for guys that have played here for so long. And you're supposed to have so much trust in those seniors, and they both have that athletic ability. So it's not even, what we've seen, in terms of the seniority roles of guys that are maybe playing, but, above their head, and they just don't really have that ceiling, that athletic ceiling to be really starting at Miami. It wasn't the case. It was just kind of seemed like between the ears, continual mistakes from those guys. And then throughout the year, you saw the kind of changing of the guard with James Williams coming in and flashing and playing so well through certain stretches of the season. And even guy like Cam Kitchens, Avante Williams coming back from his suspension and flashing as well. The safety position, looks like it has, some talent going into next season that you can really be excited about, some elite level talent too. This offseason is going to be about, getting that cornerback position a little bit more settled and getting more production overall as a unit, because like you mentioned, the communication, the mistakes, just the mental errors just happen too often in the secondary.
You mentioned the total pass yards. I don't look at that necessarily as too telling of a stat, because it depends on how many passes you're facing. I like to go to yards per pass attempt because that controls a little bit more for the situation. Miami's yards per passing attempt the last 3 years has kind of been in that same range, let's say 30 to 40, which is good. I mean, solid top third of the country, but nothing crazy. When they were peaking, we were talking about top five with Jaquan Johnson, Redwine, Mike Jackson, and some of those guys. So it's the pass defense, I don't think is that much worse than where it's been, but the tackling in the secondary was absolutely awful. There's tackling problems throughout the team. I thought the secondary, to me, was the most disappointing. DJ Ivey, you mentioned, there's a reason why all of our coaches who are good coaches who've been around good defenses and good players fall in love with him in practice, because the guy looks amazing. He's huge and he plays great in practice, but his confidence isn't there in games. And I think starting with that Alabama game where he got smoked by Jameson Williams, that just sapped his confidence and he never recovered. And what kills me about DJ Ivey is if he just tackled at his size, that would make up so much of the gap between what he can be and what he is. Just tackle. You're going to be so much better player. And that never happened. So combine that with the mental issues, with the fact that he's not a speedster to begin with. Very, very disappointing year for him. Corey Couch, another disappointing year, took a step back, lost a lot of ground to Marcus Clark, who I don't think anybody expected Marcus Clark to be starting over a healthy Ivy and to Corey Couch this year. But that's what happened. So it was interesting to see that development. I thought Clark showed some physicality towards the end of the year, which is the knock on him. You saw him with some big hits in the last couple games. So you hope to see that continue. He has ball skills as a former wide receiver, but he had some pretty high profile plays where it was 50-50 balls that he was beaten out, whether it was that play with Virginia, which should have been a pick, ended up being a miracle touchdown catch, the difference in that game probably. And a couple other times where he got big boy a little bit in the end zone. You want to see his ball skills improve there, but the fact that he's starting at the end of the year, a positive sign with him. Tyreek Stevenson, I think, is very, very good. Probably the best player on the defense, most talented. Really, really had a solid year with the physicality he brought at that cornerback position. Probably ideally more of a nickel, that basically similar to the role he played at Georgia, where he's playing inside, using his size, but still covering guys. I think that's his NFL role. For us, outside corner, he's fine. But beyond that, there's question marks. Al Blades missed the whole year, basically just with injuries and recovery. So a lot of question marks there. Malik Curtis didn't play really, but you saw him on special teams make a couple tackles, which is nice because he's fast, he's athletic. The physicality was the question as a converted wide receiver, kind of like with Marcus Clark. You saw some physicality. You feel better about where he could go. But that's a position that needs a talent upgrade. It's going to get it with this recruiting class. Obviously, you saw the focus on the position. I think Chris Graves is someone that can play right away. We'll have time to talk about that. But if you're breaking down this year's group, tackling is the story to me, 100%. And then safety, same thing. Gervin Hall was tackling the wrong guy. Some of the plays looked like he had a glitch. He was being controlled by, a controller, and he just tackled the wrong guy. It didn't even make sense physically. He fell out. He's now at Utah State. Band is going to try to reclaim that one. But extremely disappointing from him. Bubba Bolden, you hope he'd play more like the guy you saw in the first half of last year that looked like an NFL player instead of the guy who missed tackles and had the demolition man haircut in the second half of the season. That's what you got before he got hurt. So that was a disappointing year. But safety, you're feeling good overall because of what you got from Cam Kitchens. Unbelievable tackler. There were some questions about his tackling coming out of high school. Totally unfounded. The guy can tackle. He looked like Jaquan Johnson with his reliability already. I mean, I can count on two fingers. I maybe two tackles he missed all year. Was really, really sound, including some key tackles, a game-winning one against NC State. We didn't see the ball hawking element, which he could do. One of the best ball hawks in recent Dade County history. He's going to be someone to watch going forward as a key player on this defense. Elite intangibles. He's only going to get better and take more of a leadership role. And then James Williams caught everybody's attention as a future star with some of the tackles he made, some of the hits, sending guys somersaulting backwards, game-winning interception against Pitt. Really, aside from just some stupid penalties where he just let his emotions get the better of him, and then some failure to wrap, which can be coached. You saw a guy had unbelievable talent and has the speed, in my opinion, to play safety. You like his versatility. I think that'll increase as he gets more comfortable. He's going to do more different things. But I didn't see a guy at safety that just said, this guy can't play the position. I think he can do that, among other things. And Avante Williams, great to see him back. That pick against Georgia Tech was probably the play of the year on defense. At least that's the first thing that comes to my mind. So looking at the defensive backs as a whole, disappointing year for T-Rob. Personally, I think the tackling that Banda brought, we need to see some more of that, and maybe more of an emphasis in practice, because Banda certainly emphasized that it was key to his approach, and you saw much better results with the tackling in years past than he did this year. Some of that's talent, but some of that's coaching. T-Rob's got to tighten that up if he stays, and whoever comes in to help T-Rob out, that needs to really improve. You got talent at safety, corner. Tyreek Stevenson comes back, you're going to be fine at that one spot, but you need someone to back them up and to support them on the other side as well. So a lot of question marks there at the cornerback position. Safety, I think we feel better about what we have going forward just because of the talent.
Absolutely, D-Money. So let's send it out here. We went through the offense, we went through the defense. Let's kind of wrap up this 2021 season with your final thought to end this podcast. And, overall, what was your, overall takeaway from this season that you saw from the Canes? 7-5 finish, Manny Diaz fired, and Mario Cristobal set up for the future. And future's looking bright for the Canes, I think. So, what was your overall thoughts on how this 2021 season went?
To me, it was a reckoning, really, because you had Blake James, who bet on Manny with the horrible process that led to Manny being hired. That was a bet. That was an unorthodox process. It was a very strong statement in favor of Manny. You had Manny betting on himself by coaching this defense. So both guys bet on themselves and each other. And this is the year where the rubber met the road. We found out whether those were good bets. And ultimately we learned conclusively that they were not. Manny got fired because his defense was terrible in the hundreds, depending on a scoring defense, and very poor from a yards per play standpoint. And he couldn't recruit. The recruiting class was in shambles until Morrow came. So the two things you banked on him with, that he was recruiting some good players and his defense is good, that went out the window. So that was the end of Manny. Blake went out with Manny. So those are reckoning. It needed to happen. Either those guys were going to make it or they weren't, and we found out they weren't the guys on the field. So that's my one takeaway. The other takeaway, of course, the emergence of TVD as possibly the best quarterback we've had here since the QBU era. It's hard not to get excited. We got excited about Kaya, who's our all-time leading passer. Probably would have had a better legacy if he stayed his senior year, but Kaya did not have the physical tools that this guy brings to the table already. I think this guy right now, TVD as a sophomore, is better than Kaya ever was, and certainly better than anybody else. Even Derek King, who's a great college player, I don't think was as good as TVD was this year when Derek King was in his prime. So just a special player there. And then the physicality. I thought, bottom line, this was not a physical football team. This team had a lot of skill. That's why they passed the ball so well, threw and caught the ball so well, ran with it so well. It lacked physicality. That goes on the front seven, just the body types, the lack of that, what you see with these playoff teams, that smothering nature up front, the length, the twitch, just what you want to see it look like in the front seven. We did not look like that this year. And we got further from what we should be looking like. Manny was close from 16 to 18. Wasn't all the way there, but he was close, really far by the end of this 2021 season in the front seven, and then tackling throughout the team. Just no physicality whatsoever. From a tackling standpoint, no consistency and just attention to detail from a tackling standpoint. It was poor, and that's one of the reasons why Manny's no longer the head coach. Then on the offensive end, the same issue with physicality. We could not get 3rd and 1s, 4th and 1s when we needed it, could not set the tone for running the ball. Oregon, one thing you look at them, you look at Pro Football Focus, they're number 2 in line yards. Subjective stat, I get it, but they created yards for their backs. And when you look at their backs, those backs were not very special, in my opinion. I don't think Oregon has had very talented running backs in the Cristobal era. Solid guys. Miami has talented backs, guys that can take it the distance, but we need more push up front. Pass blocking, okay. I think the passing game in general is strong all the way around, but the ability to be physical on offense, to be physical on defense, that is what Miami has lacked, and that is what Mario needs to bring, both through his coaching, his staff hires, his philosophy, and his recruiting. That needs to improve if this program is going to become a program that can be respected. Because right now, this is a soft football team. That's what the tape from 2021 shows.
Yeah, D-Money, it was a season that led to a ton of changes throughout the Miami Hurricanes program, to the very tops, all the way up to athletic director. It really has now set the stage for a new era in Hurricanes football. I think the fan base and the community is more excited maybe more excited for Coach Cristobal than any of Miami's recent coaching hires. So the community's excited, fan base is excited for very good reason. And I think the sky's the limit once he brings in this 2022 class and has everything focused towards winning on the field in this 2022 season. So it's always good to look back at the year that was and kind of reevaluate like we just did. The strengths, the weaknesses, what can get better heading into 2022. So thanks, D-Money, for coming on and sharing your thoughts on Canes football.
My pleasure. Let's put this year behind us now. We are 0-0. We are undefeated. And this is going to be an awesome offseason. It already was a good signing day. I think January 8th, when these Army All-Americans announced, you're going to have some good news coming your way. If you're a Canes fan, Kevin Coleman, Cyrus Moss announcing. I think you're going to get 1 or 2 very good announcements for the Canes. You're going to see staff announcements coming shortly. And it's just going to keep on rolling. Offseason, there could be bad news and good news. The bad news is usually harder to predict. So knock on wood, we're not going to have too much of that. But I'm very confident we're going to have a lot of good news between now and that February signing day, because the recruiting momentum is real. The class of 2023, that momentum is real. You already got 5 5-stars committed to coming on campus. The staff, they're going to have budgets to get guys they want. I think you're going to see some exciting names. Transfer portal is hot, and that's going to be an area where Miami is very focused, again, on those body types that we've been discussing throughout this podcast. So it's going to be a very fun offseason at Canes Inside. A lot better than last year. We were looking at Derek King rehab, and not a lot of recruiting news to get excited about. This will be an offseason to remember. So can't wait to get it started.
Absolutely. Plenty to look forward to. So you guys know what to do. Stay locked into CanesInsight.com for all the latest team news, recruiting news. And of course, the message board is always popping. For my guy D-Money, I'm Stefan, and we out.